Hey sailors, let's have another discussion because you guys have been popping off recently. And a couple of weeks ago, I suggested that maybe I should do a video on linear versus non-linear progression in World of Warcraft. And I do try and contain my thoughts to World of Warcraft for the sake of the channel. Now, while penning that down, it's an idea I've been tossing around since like the Burning Crusade. I've had like a decade to think about this thing. And every time I did, I came up with new perspectives from it, like pros and cons, yes and no's. And it's not an easy subject to tackle. And ultimately, when I sat down and started writing down my ideas that I kept thinking about, I really came down to something very simple. This is an RPG game with gear as its primary focus. And it doesn't matter how much time I spend discussing like specific stuff. Like, it's important to understand the specifics of why Azerite armor is bad. It's important to discuss the specifics of how poisonous it can be to be throwing around a lot of heavy loot, and how we have to deal with the two sides of the coin there. Because we hear so much from the extremes all the time. We hear from the ultra casual guys who are very vocal, and we hear from the very extreme top end guys, and they're very vocal. But that's not where the players are, like right in the middle. Most people are in the middle, and they're mostly silent as well. And this is the difficult to gauge what they're thinking. So vast majority has become a bit of a meme, at least in my eyes, because so many people claim to know what the vast majority of people want. And that's hard to gauge at all. Like, it's completely fictitious because you don't know what the vast majority wants. Most people think the vast majority are casuals. What does casual mean? It's nonsense. It's entirely down to what you define casual to mean. Casuals can be super shit players in some players' eyes. You say casual, it just means people who can't string two spells together in the right order. Casuals are just somebody who don't play a lot. Casuals are people who play a huge amount but don't do anything. It's all very different. But it's also where the bulk of players leave from. The very extreme top end who are dedicated and love the game, they stuck and will stick through thick and thin on a lot of occasions to enjoy the niche piece of content they like, whether it's extreme PvP or Mythic Plus or raiding or whatever it might be. And the ultra casuals might complain a lot, and some of them very, very loudly, that they deserve or are entitled to some things. But at the same time, most of the changes in the game affect them very, very little because they're not invested into various aspects of the game where this stuff will really matter. So it's hard to gauge what's actually going on. So I was thinking about this stuff, and I was thinking about gear. Gear is the driving force that binds a lot of this together. It doesn't matter if you're ultra casual or you're mega hardcore and everything else in between. Gear is the thing that really drives the game forward. And what amazes me so much, and I'm going to turn this bitch on its head considering all the negativity around BFA. I'm going to turn it on its head and I'm going to say what amazes me so much about the WoW community. Doesn't matter if it's dark times or good times. It's the passion. The passion people have to try and make things better. Even if it's misguided in a lot of ways, and that can include me as well, is the passion to want to make things better. But because some of these subjects are very complex, and we're dealing with people who are very young, who are very old, and all these kinds of different approaches, is that their personal experience in the game will taint which aspects of the bad is the culprit in a certain situation. So what I see generally, and I was kind of influenced a little bit by the outbreak of a thread on MMO Champion recently, which was about the fact that on Wednesday or Tuesday, if you're in the US, the item levels of the game are going to shoot back up, which is a normal process by this point. And that's part of the problem, is that it's an anticipated, expected process that's about to occur, where suddenly the barrier of the game is just going to lift. The ceiling is going to lift. And all the content you've been doing already, doing that same content again, is now going to be more rewarding. It's like an illusion of progress, right? In a lot of occasions, it's an illusion of progress, because where you are right now is likely where you're going to be in a couple of months' time. You're going to be in exactly the same place, but your item level or whatever will have gone up. And people have a big problem with this, because this illusion is starting to shatter for many. And if not everybody is now just totally not convinced by this projection Blizzard's putting out of character progress. It's not real anymore. It's not tangible because it's so expected that it's going to happen. And for the most part, in very many areas of the game, the gear, which is the driving force of this progress, is actually going to be the same items, but they'll have slightly more numbers. Now, you'll notice the observant amongst you who haven't been paying attention to my chubby face flapping its gums will have noticed that I am in Shattrath City right now on my warrior. There's a doll, and get us here. And the reason I came here is so many times when this discussion comes up about gear, there's a lot of references to the Burning Crusade, and that triggers me to no end. It triggers me to no end. You might remember about 6 months back, I made a video which was looking at don't change the past to fit what you want to be true in the future. You have to be accurate. We have to try and be there. And even in there, it's hard, even for me who research this stuff, to be entirely accurate because so much in the game has changed. So I want to use an example here, and I'm not being pedantic here, but I think it's pretty obvious and will highly illustrate what we're talking about. Let's introduce this fella. This is the Gear Monster. He's ordinarily a very tasty, lovely marshmallow to be toasted over a campfire. However, he's about to destroy Manhattan. Oh no! Oh no! So if we were to say this is the gearing system, what's wrong with him? What's made him so, in probably modern day terms, he's toxic. He's toxic. He's going to destroy a city. What's made it so bad for so many? And that's the interesting thing, isn't it? It's not only bad for everybody on the far ultra casual, but it's bad for everybody at the top end as well. The whole thing is poison. The whole thing has become poison because of this fella. So what is the reason for the poison? So everyone tries to narrow down the big thing, the big culprit, but it's a number of things, and that's the issue here. So we've got, so let's say his right leg is overly inflated item levels, because now we have an expansion where the item levels are hugely wide. Like, they jump by hundreds of item levels, causing squishes on the regular. On the left, we have the random the sheer quantity of items. We have the left arm, which is the random stat attribution, Titan Forging, War Forging, gem slots, all this kind of stuff. The head, of course, would be Azerite armor, right? And you can see this, but it's all connected to this big fat body. And this comes back to the passion I talked about earlier, is I'm reading people go at each other's throats, and it kills me to see the players at each other's throats, arguing, fighting amongst themselves, but all sides are pretty much correct. But they're angry, frustrated, furious even, that their favorite game, the same as me, because god damn it, do I want this game to be really good again. But they're furious at each other. Well, it's Blizzard's obviously fault, and maybe they was given direction by the player base that pushed them in that way, but it of course comes down to Blizzard's decision making. And they're all correct. Yes, each of these things is a problem, but they're all connected to this. And what is this? What is this overall thing? And for me, it's, god damn it, players want to give a shit about their gear again. Gear is the main driving force. It's a tasty, lovely marshmallow. It's the nice thing. And fuck me, it doesn't matter who you are in this game. My God, do you want to give a shit about gear again? I want to care about it. Now, you might say, Preacher, you don't really care about gear. Not really, but even less now than ever before. I'm not asked about item level. I think it's probably a more clear word there. I'm not asked about the item level. That comes my way. I would like to have interesting items, though. God damn, man. I'm not that blind. I'm not that disconnected from the world. I would like to care about my character. And I think you guys do too. And I don't think it matters what part of the game you're playing. By God, do you want to care about your fucking character? And we're in a situation where Blizzard needs to do something because it affects so much of the player base. This poison. That it's got to be, regardless of how you feel about Warfronts. We can argue all day whether you like Warfronts or not. We can argue all day about whether you like Island Expeditions or not. We can argue all day whether you like Mythic Plus or not, raiding, PvP, pet battling, whatever the fuck it might be. We can argue all day whether one's good, one's bad, it should be more casual, it should be more friendly. No, it should be hardcore. Doesn't matter, because the glue that binds it all together is gear. The gear is what binds it all together. And once that falls down, dead. So how has it got here? And what's the problem here? So I'm going to give you an example of how it was different and how some of us remember it and how much better, and I would say just objectively better, but it is subjective. I can't deny that. And simpler. So much simpler. that made gearing special and how it affected all the player base. Every single last person. So, first of all, this kind of did draw from the linear versus non-linear. So in non-linear progression, so linear is obviously going from the vanilla style, which was everybody in the game needs to go through Molten Core, then Blackwing Lair, then AQ40, then Naxxramas. Raiding was really the only true progression path in vanilla. Now, this created a lot of problems for Blizzard. Forget the player base. I know that some people who maybe joined later would expect that during this period of time where a new player joined the game mid-vanilla and was never, ever within a chance of reaching Naxxramas would be whining and complaining about that. That wasn't the case. As somebody who was a big, heavy forum lurker in vanilla, and made several posts as well, actually, and used to browse every blog I could get my hand on, every discussion about World of Warcraft, it wasn't actually a big topic. It was extremely rare. And why was that? It's just how the game was. Like, there was nothing to compare it to. There was no expansion to look back and compare it to and contrast with. It was just how the game was, and people came into the game knowing that and dealing with it. So it wasn't a big topic of discussion. You might think you would expect it to be, but it wasn't. It became a discussion later down the line when we started having comparison. But in non-linear, when Blizzard realized that ultimately everybody starts at the beginning, right? Dungeons and Molten Core, then some of those players make it to Blackwing Lair, and only some of those players then make it to AQ40, and then only some of those players make it to Naxxramas. It's very clear that Blizzard's pouring millions of dollars and man hours and development time into creating content that they know from their data before it even releases, before Naxxramas even releases, that nobody's going to really get to see it. And that's obviously a problem for Blizzard. So they decided to switch it up. They switched it up. And in TBC, they made strives to do that. And one of them was the badge gear, which, as you can see behind me. Now, there were catch-up systems. And I'm talking about catch-up here. There were catch-up systems in vanilla. They did exist. They weren't as prominent as they are today, not even close, but they did exist. And in TBC, they made it a bit more blatant with badge gear. Badges were something you got for doing heroic dungeons, which were extremely difficult. I'm not sure if Karazhan ultimately ended up dropping badge gear. It might have done. But either way, doing content rewarded you with badges. And then once you collected enough badges, you went and bought an item. Now, people's memories are a bit skewed of this. So let's have a quick look. This is the badge guy. Here he is. He sells them for gold now because the badges don't exist anymore. But you can see straight off the bat, there wasn't an item in every slot. There's actually very, very few items. 3 of these are shields. 3 of these are shields, 2 rings, 2 trinkets, 1 tank, 1 DPS, and a cloak. That's it. That's all you got the offer to. Now, they did have extra stuff here, and you might go, see, they had stuff that went in every slot. No, this was the fire resistance gear. You can see here, it's all fire resistance stuff. This is the stuff they introduced mainly for Illidan, actually. Illidan Stormrage was when... this is my TBC character, this prop warrior, although he was Tauren at the time. But this was the stuff you needed for Illidan. I don't think we needed it anywhere else. I'm probably forgetting something really obvious that involved fire, but I don't think so. I think I only wore it for Illidan. And Leothras. So, that was it. You only had a few items to pick from. That was it. And this lasted all the way up until Zulaman's release, which was pretty late on in the expansion. That was all they had. This is real catch-up. And what is the idea of catch-up? What is catch-up supposed to be for? Well, catch-up is that if you re-roll or you join the game late, you have a reasonable way outside of the normal progression paths of the game in order to give you a foundation to be useful in that content, so you have a chance of getting into it, right? Because in vanilla, if you were in an AQ40 guild, but they weren't prepared to carry you, and you decided, hey, I don't want to be a healer anymore, I want to be a warrior, it's back to the dungeons for you, back to the 5-mans, back to the 10-mans, and then back to Molten Core, then back to Blackwing Lair. Because ultimately, despite the difficulty of the raids not particularly increasing, even in Naxxramas wasn't particularly difficult, you had to have appropriate gear to make it the appropriate challenge. Right? Naxxramas had many easy bosses, but if you didn't have appropriate gear, then things just hit too hard and you couldn't do enough damage. It was as simple as that, really. The same as any RPG in the world. You take a low-level RPG character to the end game straight away, you simply don't have the HP or the damage to deal with the things that are there. They expect you to be of a certain grade before you would appear in that area. It's a very simple concept. So by the time Zulaman roll around, they decided to buff this up, and they actually dropped it. You'll recognize it here, transmoggers, is that you can see, right? You can see that they put in some extra items. Not much of an upgrade, though. If you can see here, the early stuff was item level 77. Now, this has been changed a couple of times. I'm going to highlight this because I know a lot of people get this wrong. But later on, they introduced some item level 80, and they did do that for every slot. So this was like the official catch-up, although it required a lot of badges to get. But they also upped the sources of badges. Badges started dropping from more places, which made it easier, so to speak, to acquire many badges. And with this gear, you had a much better chance at doing heroic dungeons, because heroic dungeons were very difficult for the most part. There were some easier than others, but you get the idea. So it's all relatively late. And now some people are going to say the Isle of Keldanas as well, but if you go there again and check that, because the vendor is still there, you'll see like 4 items. It was not like a full gearing system. It was there to supplement your normal progress. They still wanted you to go through the progress paths, but they'll give you some extra stuff along the way in order to speed it up, make it quicker, allow you to make leaps and bounds. Now, I would argue that catch-up has gone at this point. And you might think that's crazy. We get catch-up all the time. Catch-up has just become the gearing process for many people. Gamers are smart. Gamers are really smart. They are. The gamers are really smart. And they are now wise to how Blizzard runs things. Think about this. Catch-up happened like twice in TBC. I've just kind of shown the 2 main points. So far, we've had 3 bumps in catch-up before the second raid. Think about that. It's nuts. That's not even mentioning things like allowing Azerite armor to be tradable, an Azerite armor vendor being implemented, all these kinds of extra changes. But they've been bumped and bumped and bumped to allow for under the guise of catch-up. What are you catching up to? We've only had 1 raid. That's it. There's only been a single raid. But there now is this idea, and catch-up is defended by a lot of people. You'll actually easily find people going, wow, you're being a special snowflake because you don't want us to catch up. And the obvious reply is then, what are you catching up to? Now, the response would probably be for Battle for Dazar'alor. Okay, so you're obviously not new. This is the thing. You're obviously not new, but you've not done Uldir at all. But you need to catch up for Battle for Dazar'alor. Now, I'm not going to deny that, because some people will be like, Uldir was crap, Battle for Dazar'alor looks good. Fine. Okay, let's put it that way. But that doesn't change the fact that for the vast majority of people, haha, there's that word again, or for a large amount of people, the catch-up is just how they gear their characters normally. It's not via any of the more invested progression paths, such as pushing Mythic Plus on a regular basis, or pushing heavy raiding. And we can see this statistically from the data on WoW Progress, and we can see it from the feedback we've obviously seen on Mythic Plus, and the same with PvP. In order to get the reasonably good gear, you've got to do some investment in that. People aren't doing that. Instead, they're just relying on the easy stuff. There's no doubt about it. And it's pretty crazy that catch-up is just the gearing system now. And I think that's fair to say. I'm sure some people would disagree, but do you feel like it's a catch-up, considering we've not had the second raid yet, and we've had all these different forms of catch-up come into the game? I don't know, man. I don't know. And this catch-up also leads to the obvious item level inflation across the expansion. Why? Well, you've given people access to gear up, beyond 385 from so many sources. And normal Battle for Dazar'alor drops 385 gear. Now, I'm not so disconnected that I'm saying everybody's got a 385 character. Unlikely. But the chances are a lot of people, and I can say this because my priest, who's got less than a few hours played, has 3 items above 380 already. And he's not even done anything. I just log in and do a Warfront or something. And he already has those things. People going into normal Battle for Dazar'alor, some of them are going to be overgeared already, despite not doing anything really to do that. So that's going to happen. But I'm not saying it's easy to get 385 outside of raiding and Mythic Plus. I'm not saying that, but you can get pretty close to it. So there's some very minimal upgrades already for content that's not out yet, and that's for the rest of the player base. It's something that raiders are typically used to. Certainly if you're a Mythic raider, you don't expect really upgrades to exist in normal or whatever. Some stuff in heroic, maybe in Mythic, but now it's affecting like everybody. Coming back to the gear issue then, people want to care about their gear. So a real life example of this is the fact that I haven't really chased gear on my Druid or my Mage since we killed Mythic Gahoon, which was a long time ago. In fact, I've had something like 4 upgrades since then. Why? Because I could have invested a lot of time into them. Well, let's play this game. Name 5 items you currently have equipped on your main character. Now, some of you might be able to do that, but I guarantee it's a handful. Because you don't care. Don't care about these items. These items are meaningless. They're faceless. They're useless. Like, they're not engaging. There was no excitement about getting them. And I imagine a lot of cases, certainly when you hit a sort of gear threshold, whichever that might have been for you, is you weren't even sure if they were an upgrade or not. I can tell you from experience, I've seen people pass around items so they can individually sim it before awarding it to the final winner because they don't know if it's any good. How can you care about an item if you don't know if it's any good or not? Right? What the fuck, dude? How can I care about this thing if I don't even know if it's any good? That's the craziness of this situation. And it's not all these aspects that feed into our little gear monster here. This is what's going on. So, people want to care about their gear. They really do. I just said I didn't really farm gear on my druid or my mage. Why? I know, and the rest of the player base knows as well, that on Wednesday, I'm probably going to replace everything I've acquired since the starting of BFA in a matter of days. Some of it will probably be the same items I already have equipped, just higher item level. Right? Everybody knows this is going to happen. Because it's happened before and it'll happen again. We have full resets. How can you care about something that you know that in 2-3 months' time is going to be dead and gone and in the bin, scrapped, literally scrapped? Right? Very hard to invest in this. It's always been that way. I'm sure that's what you're screaming right now. It's always been that way. So let's use a real-like example. I'm going to say something now. And remember, I did ask you to think of 5 items. I'm going to ask you, if you started later than, say, Warlords of Draenor, to imagine that there was a time when people got excited about a pair of boots. That might seem ridiculous. Certainly if you're a newer player. Excited about a pair of boots? Why? Because what have boots become for all of us? There's loads of them. Again, coming back, excessive amount of items. And they're all kind of the same. And again, mixed in with the randomness, which is one of the arms, they don't mean anything, right? There's so many pairs of boots out there. And they're crit haste, haste mastery, verse mastery. There's like 4 different pairs of the same sort of stats slightly shuffled around. There's crit haste that leans more towards crit. There's crit haste that leans more towards haste. There's verse mastery that leans a little bit in the middle. There's mastery haste, which has a little bit more haste, a little less mastery, and so on and so forth, and on and on and on. And you can get the idea that how the fuck am I supposed to learn 20 different pairs of boots? Why would I ever do that? Well, I'm going to tell you a time I can name the pair of boots that I had and in Black Temple. Decade later, I can remember their names specifically. And that's pretty crazy. And I'll show you why this simpler system is what gives people drive, gives people goals, and makes them give a shit. Because I gave a shit about a pair of boots. And I'm like the worst guy for gear ever. I don't even loot mobs, which drives people crazy. But I do. Let me show you. So what's BIS? Let's talk about BIS. BIS is a word that gets thrown around a lot recently because people like to talk about setting goals and things like that. And ultimately, it's the idea of setting goals is that you want something you can be proud of and you can be happy with and you care about, right? That's why people want a goal. So, as gear is the driving force behind many, many players, let's see how you make something matter. So let's go to the Burning Crusade, because this is, again, I'm only doing the Burning Crusade because this is what people reference a hell of a lot in these discussions. Let's go to the Black Temple. So BIS means best in slot. I'm sure many people hear BIS thrown around and don't really know what it means, because especially in BFA, because it doesn't even make sense. But BIS, best in slot, means what is the best pair of boots I can get in the game. It's actually something very normal for most RPG games. What is the best weapon? What is the best this and that, right? So that existed in World of Warcraft for a really long time. Now, I can tell you now that sabatons of rampaging elements, these are actually really good for the example I'm going to use, I just noticed, are not BIS. In fact, BIS doesn't exist in BFA. Why not? Well, for the reasons we just stated. There's how many pairs of plate boots in the game right now? They all have a myriad of stats of different varying levels. Some are better than others. Some depend on other gear I've got already. They are completely randomly changed via Warforging, Titan Forging. Gem slots make a massive difference. I can have a terribly statted pair of boots, but it's got a gem slot on it. That makes it godly. Item level also comes into this because, of course, they're all varied item levels that you can get from different levels of content. So we end up in a scenario where this 380 gem slot pair of boots that have got speed on and a Warforged that contains 3 completely random elements. But I might have a set of 385 boots or a set of 390 boots. Which one's better? I don't know without going to a third-party website and working it out. And it's not impossible, but it's completely outside of the realms of possibility for me to go through every pair of boots in the game, take into account all the random effects they might have, and then coincide that with all the other random items I can get, with how many rings are in the game, how many trinkets, how many weapons, and so on and so forth, and their variants that can occur from their random elements, and then figure out what the best item is. And the odds of me being able to achieve them are so practically non-existent that the whole system falls apart anyway. So there is no such thing. Now, some will argue that this is better, but I say no. I say absolutely not. For most people, I will stand here and say, I'm sorry, I'm very tired. It's quite late. I will say absolutely not for most people. Because for me, if the gear, which is the foundation of everything people play for, regardless of what area of the game they play, is so convoluted, so lost, and so unengaging, and always ready to be scrapped into oblivion in every single slot, then it becomes toxic and poisonous to everybody. Doesn't matter who you are, it becomes poisonous to everybody. So let's compare it. We can't do BIS in BFA. It's just not possible. Let's try and do BIS for Black Temple on boots. So let's go gear filter, class, warrior, all slots. Let's change it to feeties. Bam! There are 4 sets of boots in the Black Temple. Now you're going to say, Preacher, in modern day we have different progression paths. We have Mythic Plus and we have PvP and all this kind of thing. That's fine. I'm going to come back to it. Don't worry about it. This all works together. So I want to work out what are the best boots. Everybody break out Simcraft. No, watch. Dread boots of the Legion. Now, again, these items have been slightly changed because of how the game's changed, but it doesn't invalidate the point I'm about to make. So we've got some boots here that have crit haste on them. They have 2 gem slots, guaranteed. No randomness with these items whatsoever. And should I put the correct colors in those sockets, I will gain a 2 strength bonus. We have the pearl inlaid boots. Crit verse, which didn't exist at the time, versatility. No gem slots, no bonuses. All right, nothing special there. Tide Stompers Greaves. Oh my god. Strength, stamina, dodge. What is dodge? Butter my ass. What is dodge? That's something from like an RPG or something. They're clearly designed for attack. Now, I believe these were intellect at the time. Now we have gear that changes to strength or intellect to further muddy the waters. But I believe these were intellect at the time, but they have a 2-socket bonus with stamina. Okay, so I think they were intellect at the time. I don't think they had strength on. So they would have been more for pally tanks. Okay. Myrmidon's Treads. Strength, stamina, dodge, haste, 2 gem slots with a dodge bonus. Those are my BIS. That's it. That's as simple as it needs to be. That's it. Done. I don't need a third-party website. I don't need even much knowledge of the game to know as a protection warrior the dodge boots with a dodge bonus for me. That's really as complicated as it ever needs to fucking be. That's it. Done. And now I care about this item. Just like that. I care about this item. Why? Because those are the best ones. I can clearly see they're the best ones. That's it. I now care. I care far more than my sabatons of rampaging elements. I care way more about this item. Going into this level of content, I care significantly more about this item. Why? It's my BIS. I can work it out myself. And not only that, I've now got way more choices with it than I have with anything BFA has on offer. Why? The gem slots. The gem slots are a big deal. The gem slots contain many things that are normal for RPGs. I could put anything I want in those sockets. I could put stam in there. I could put agi in there. I could put hit in there. I think expertise was around at the time. I think so. I could put all these things in there. But I have to ask questions to myself. Do I want the dodge set bonus? Well, what's my dodge at? Is it hitting diminishing returns? If it's hitting diminishing returns, it's not worth that much to me. So maybe I don't want the bonus. What are my other stats looking like? Do I want more stamina here? Or is my hit rating too low because of my other gear right now? If that's the case, I could gem some hit, but I really would like the stamina. So instead, I could use hit stam gems. Could do that And they're mixed colours. And this is what we had, because we had a colour system for gems in TBC. We had sockets that were yellow, red, or blue. But we also had gems that were not only yellow, red, or blue, and if you matched the colours, you got the bonus, but we also had green, orange, purple, which mixed the colours together so they could fit 2 sockets. So you could mix and match stats in order to gain the extra bonus on top of what you were getting from the gems. So you had to evaluate all this stuff. And not only that, as you got different items, that could shift around your gem choices. Lacking hit, so I had to gem hit into these boots at the time. But I then got some, I got some hit shoulders, or I got a hit trinket that I can use when I need more threat. Now I can actually swap out those gems for something else, a little bit more defensive. Now I'm a better tank. How much more have I talked about a pair of shitty, simple boots than I could ever give 2 fucks about with the Sabatons of Rampaging Elements, which have Warforged, Speed, and a gem slot? Because gem slots have just turned into what's my best stat of the fucking 4 stats in the game. Crit, haste, mastery, verse. I want more crit. I want more haste. Whatever your character might want, gem that. Most of us carry that gem just to stick it in if we get a gem slot, right? That's what we do. It's so dull and faceless. It doesn't matter. The gem slot is more interesting than the actual item itself. How can you care about this stuff? If I've given more thought to Myrmidon's Treads that I'm never going to wear again in this video than I have about any of the items that I'm currently wearing, right? It's madness this way. But it works in different ways. This makes it far more interesting. So what about Mythic Plus though, Mike? We have to have this huge amount of items. No, we don't. That was a Warlords of Draenor thing. I remember distinctly when they announced that they were going to fill the dungeons with so many items with random stat allocations and just flooded the loot tables of dungeons, because it didn't used to be that way. It wasn't that way for a really long time. You would go through and find your BIS dungeon set. They exist for many expansions, and if you look at vanilla guides or TBC guides or Wrath guides, you'll find people who've put together what the best gear is from dungeons. The best cloak you want, that comes from here. The best boots you want, that comes from here. And that's how Blizzard divided up the loot tables. That also would make Mythic Plus more appealing, because you could start targeting dungeons for something that you actually want, and when you get it, because that's the annoying part, isn't it? Most of the time you're running Mythic Plus, you're hoping for a Warforged, Titanforged, something, instead of, this is where the tank boots drop, and I will farm and try and focus on that key to try and get that pair of boots, but once I've got them, pop in. And it even works with the item level spread, because some people say, well, there's multiple difficulties now. The Black Temple just had 1 difficulty. Still works, because all you do is you have Myrmidon's Treads. Item level 80 for normal, 85 for heroic, 90 for mythic. It's the same item that has the same depth to it, the same interest, and the same tag name that you remember. And you can say to your friend, I got my Myrmidon's Treads. That was a conversation people would have. And of course, I picked a ludicrous item in boots. You can obviously compare this to far more interesting items like trinkets and weapons and shields. Now, if I said to somebody, I got my Bulwark of Azeroth, awesome. I can't name any of the shields. What's the shield I even have? I don't fucking know. Honor Bat, it's one of the PvP fucking things. I don't know. I don't care. There's so many shields out there to get. There's like 2 or 3 shields in the dungeons, and then there was more that can come from PvP and so on and so forth. There's all these mixed shields. And these are very specific niche items, let alone when you start comparing things like bracers and rings, especially. Rings have gone absolutely nuts. But also, it works in a different way, again, a better way, in my opinion. The DPSers clearly want Dread Boots of the Legion. The tanks clearly want Myrmidon's Treads. There's a good distinction there of what's happening. And what you can, if we were to add BFA's terms to this, Dread Boots of the Legion could, tanks don't want that. However, it Titanforged and it got an extra gem slot and it had Leech or something on it, or Speed. Now the tanks are going, well, actually, that's way better than getting a base Myrmidon's Treads. I need to get this one. And now the DPS is like, what the fuck? Your tank boots drop somewhere else. Yeah, but they're way better. That's a really good item. Like, that's actually more interesting to me. Oh, it happened again with Myrmidon's Treads. They Titanforged, got an extra gem slot. The DPSs are now, actually, I really want a piece of that action. Let me in. And it makes it all blurred and muddy and non-distinct. And people start to care less because now it's like, well, I want some pair of boots as long as they Titanforge or I get a gem slot or something like that. But Mike, that's all too easy, right? It's all too easy. And again, this works for Mythic Plus, the same thing. Exactly the same system works there. There's no need to have so many duplicates of the same items throughout all things because it just makes people care less. They're nameless. They're not immersive. But it also works in a number of different ways. Like, how difficult should it be to get these? Because I made it sound really easy. But it's not. So this is shit. Okay, Shade of Akama. I forgot that. Shade of Akama is not a particularly difficult boss by any means. I'm not going to try and twist this into some fictitious thing. But let's look at Shade's loot table, actually. All slots, all classes. Okay, good. So he's got quite a big, chunky loot table there. Quite a few items on him. A big variety. Now, the difficulty here is, one, reaching the Black Temple, or reaching that high Mythic Plus, or that dungeon, getting that key. That would be more appropriate, right? Getting that Mythic Plus key that drops the high-level boots that you're after. And then you've got to get through Nagentus, Supremus, Shade of Akama, got to finish the dungeon on time, or something along those lines. And then I have to hope that the item drops. Now, traditionally, I believe in Black Temple, it was 2 or 3 items dropped per raid. And also, there's 3 tanks in Black Temple, plus another guy who was the backup should one of the 3 not be able to show up. But it was a 3-tank dungeon for most of Black Temple. So and I can tell you from real life experience, was the 3rd tank. I was the last tank to join the guild I was in during Black Temple. So I not only had to hope and pray when we killed Shade of Akama that, one, he dropped the boots out of all these items, of which only 2 or 3 could drop. But I had to wait for the 3rd time for them to drop. That's enough difficulty for anybody to get an item. Because once I've got it, once I've found that, let's say the best item from Mythic Plus currently comes from Mythic Plus 15. And after that, it's just more loot or whatever system they want to implement if you go beyond that. But let's say they made it like 15 or 10 if it's super difficult. It doesn't matter. But you got that and they drop from, say, Freehold, right? So once you've actually got that Freehold key, that's where they drop. I also have to hope that it drops the thing that I'm after because then I've got that item and I'm done with it. But until that point, I need to wait to get that key. And they've obviously stopped you being able to swap those items, the keys around, in order to change the dungeon. So it's not that easy. You've got to fish around for other people's keys who are also not looking for it, but it's likely that other people are looking for it because that's where their Bis boots come from. And it was kind of a similar in Legion with trinkets. Some of the trinkets were really interesting, and you had people desperately trying to do things like Upper Karazhan. I remember the Demon Hunters specifically trying to do that. And that made that item more interesting. But of course, they were then hoping it would Warforge or Titanforge or something ridiculous like that, which is not part of the plan. That makes it less interesting, makes it annoying even, frustrating to get the one that's like the base level. And you can see clearly that we can turn a pair of boots that are so simple into something way more interesting and into something that provides way more player choice and doesn't need all this crap on it. And it makes people care and it makes people interested. Now, we're talking about gear reset, because, of course, that's what's coming up and what people have been pissed off about is the gear reset coming Wednesday or Tuesday, depending on where you are, is that, yeah, but that used to happen anyway. When a new raid tier came out, then it was the same thing, right, Mike? You were scrubbing all your gear again. No, absolutely not. Unbelievable that people would even suggest such a thing. So if we look towards, say, the Sunwell, obviously. So I've got my boots from the Black Temple. I got them eventually, right? And that, obviously that's multiplied by every item in every slot. Then came the Sunwell. So let's change it back to... Oh, in fact... Oh, this is cool, actually. I made a good choice here. Pat on the back for me. So they introduced this. Wow, this is big. This is really big. They introduced a really good idea, is that we'll give boots belt and braces, but we'll enable them to generate the tier 6 bonus. Now, they dropped from the Eridar twins. Not easy. Not fucking easy. Don't expect to be there super quick unless you're in, like, the world top first guild. And I see a lot of people do this, is they say, nah, you always replace gear super quickly back in the past. It's as if everybody who's still playing World of Warcraft was always at the forefront of the game. No, people in my community have worked fucking really hard and have only just killed Mythic Gahoon, right? No, not everybody got Bis. It was actually pretty rare to get Bis. And people seem to pretend like they got Bis in a week or something fucking ridiculous. Grow the fuck up, man. That's not how it went. Don't twist it. So we had this item. So this is actually tricky to get now. Because not only do we have to get the Eridar twins, which means we need to kill Caligos, Brutalis, and Felmist, and survive that fucking gauntlet, but we have to kill the Eridar twins. But not only that, we have to hope that they drop... let's look at the Eridar twins loot table. All classes. Ooh, mama! Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, the PvP necks were in here. I remember this. And shoulders. Man, the Aerodar twins had a lot to answer for, didn't they? But they did drop more items. I think you got 5 items. I think, but some of them were like weirdly guaranteed. It's like guaranteed to get a PvP neck or something. Anyway, so not only do we have to hope and pray that the Aerodar twins die, and they drop the correct token, right? And they drop the correct token. Oh, we need to do this. Bam. There we go. We also have to compete now with the warrior, the shamans, and the hunters, right? The warriors, the hunters, and the shamans. So that's DPS warriors, tank warriors, the hunters, and the shamans. Of which, if you know anything about the Sunwell, there was a lot of shamans. There was a lot of shamans running around there. But once you actually got it, you were done. Think about that. You were done. That's it. It got it. And it opened up a whole new world. Specifically, this item did. Because this gave you options to drop other pieces of your tier for other important items, right? You can get rid... So previously, say Black Temple, warriors, prot warriors would have wore tier shoulders, tier chest, tier legs, and tier gloves. We used the Illidan helm, I remember specifically. Again, faceplate the impenetrable. I cared about that item. I'm not making this shit up. I fucking cared about that item. So we had that. But now we've got these boots. We can drop legs. We could drop gloves. We could drop shoulders. We could drop the fucking chest. I've actually got some really good stuff that I could go in these slots, but I couldn't because I needed to maintain my tier bonuses. All right, now I can mix and match. Boom, motherfucker. Got the braces. Oh, shit. Now I can really start messing around with my gear. What am I missing? What do we need coming up? Messing around with gear, working on to other stats. And then we had one of these items, like the Pauldrons of Perseverance, which were really cool. They were tank shoulders. You can see they had parry on. How fucking easy is that? Did the other shoulders drop it? They did. So you had crit verse or DPS shoulders, tank shoulders. I wanted these shoulders. There you go. They're the tank shoulders. I want to get a tier 6 piece for my boots, braces, or my belt. And then I'm going to put in these shoulders. And then I've got 2 gem slots so I can fucking go to town on this, baby. And this is what makes you care about loot. And my God, do people want to care about their loot again. They don't want this constant wiping of their characters every couple of months. They don't want it. It's bad for everybody. It's bad for the start of the game, and it's bad for the end of the game. And I don't understand why we've got it. And I've also kind of touched on it here, but I don't want to labor the point. But please, God, can we have some RPG elements back in this fucking gear? What's wrong with having dodge and parry on tank gear? What's wrong with hit and expertise? What's wrong with fucking having various levels of gear that aren't these monotonous, boring pieces of shit? What's wrong if some characters prefer armor pen or multi-strike and things like that? What's wrong with having that variety? You know what? Because you can make way less items that are more tailored to people who like certain stats. Way, way less. Way, way less. And that makes those items more incredible, more interesting, more fun, and allow players to mess around with their characters. And I know it sounds like you're just talking about like Path of Exile or something. This was 10 years ago. Right in front of you now. This was 10 years ago where this shit was going on, and it was way more interesting, and people gave a shit. And because this loot was not readily available and not showered on you, because it doesn't need to be, because it becomes meaningless to be showered with gear. It's like being out in rain. It's like I see rain all the time. It's not that big of a deal. It makes it more interesting. God damn it. It doesn't matter if Warfronts are better. It doesn't matter if Island Expeditions are better. It doesn't matter if all this other stuff is better. It doesn't matter if this guy is rampaging through the game all the time. It doesn't matter. It's got to be fixed because I see a lot of passionate people. I see them super passionate and they're all trying to figure out why this guy fucking exists. This monster. Why does it exist? And I look at it as like, it's pretty obvious. You made it so that nobody gives a shit. And why the fuck should they? Why should anybody give a shit if they don't even know if it's worth equipping in the fucking first place? I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.